Hello, and welcome to this Blender tutorial. And in this tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to create these water bottles in Blender. I am going to simplify the tutorial a little bit so I don't show you how to create everything on the label, because it did take a little while to add all that text. But I will be showing you how to create the water bottle in Blender and set up the materials and create the label in paint.net. So, let's get started. We're going to begin by deleting the default cube, and we're going to add a circle. I'm going to lower the vertex count on that circle to about 16. I think that'll work. And I'm also going to delete the lamp. There's no need for that. We're going to be completely resetting up our lighting setup. So let's begin by extruding up a little bit along the z-axis, and let's scale it out just a tiny bit. Because if you take a look at water bottles, at least most water bottles, they have a bulge at the bottom, sort of, where it kind of expands in that area. And I'll extrude up again, something like, be right about there, and scale it down just a tiny bit. There. And then we'll want to extrude again, scale it out, and I'm going to move up a little bit. And extrude it up here, right like that, and then extrude again here, extrude again here. It's a little too small. We need to make room for the cap, so make sure there is room, and we're going to go in and add that now. So what we want to do is extrude up a tiny bit there, right about there, and extrude again and scale it out, because there is a little bit of a lip at the top of the water bottle there that the cap rests on. And we'll extrude that up a little bit. Let me zoom in a little more. Make that a little bit smaller. Extrude it, scale it in. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to extrude this, scale it up, and rotate it along the z-axis. Then extrude it again, scale it up, rotate it along the z-axis, extrude it again and scale it up, rotate it along the z-axis, and again until we finally get something sort of like that. This will be the twisted area on the inside of the cap you screw the cap on, because the cap will be a little bit transparent, so we'll be able to see it a little bit, so we do want that in there. Now we need to go in and we need to add a little bit more detail to the water bottle, because it's smooth right now. We want some ridges, typically. Water bottles have those. And actually, let me close this off. Hit E, scale it in to right about there, then hit E and Alt-M. We'll just merge those and move it up, because the bottom is indented a little bit. Typically there is a little more detail on the edges than that, but in this case we won't be adding that. It doesn't really add a lot to the image. So, I'm just gonna press Ctrl L and add a couple loops here. Just some edge loops. Maybe about that many. And what we want to do here is we just want to scale those, scale those in. Just like that. Extrude it, scale it in, and then scale it along the z-axis. And just keep doing that with all of these. Almost done. This is the last one. Alright, so now we have the ridges on there, and that helps with the grip on the water bottle, so people can hold it a little easier. And looks like right about here is sort of expands a bit. It's sort of, yeah, expands out a little bit, so we're gonna add a couple more edge loops on here. Maybe not quite that many. About like, that'll work. Something like that. And we'll extrude that in, scale it down, add this, scale that down along the z-axis as well. Let's extrude that in, maybe I scaled that in a little too far. And we're not gonna extrude the one on the top. instead I'm going to scale that out a little bit. There. Now we have something like that. That looks pretty good. Now, actually, I think I'm going to scale these out a little bit more, because the label's going to be going on the outside right here. So there are little creases or crevices, but they're not going to be as big and as noticeable. Alright, something a little bit more like that. So that looks good. Let's add a subsurf modifier. Come over here to the modifiers panel and add a subdivision surface. Set it to something like that. I'm going to set it smooth, or set the shading to smooth. And of course we get these nasty black lines on the outside that look really horrible. That's because the normals are not accurate. This pretty much happens by default when you add circles. If I can show you here, let's take a look at the normals in the face. As you can see, these ones are pointing out, but these ones are pointing in. And because some of them are pointing out and some of them are pointing in, that's what's causing those black lines, and it looks pretty horrible and pretty ugly. So, if I scale that back down, let's select everything and hit Control-N. That'll recalculate the normals. And now you'll notice that they're all pointing in the same direction, which is what they want. And let's get rid of that. Alright, the ridges, everything got a little too soft when we subdivided this, so we need to add a little bit more to it. Hang on, let me turn off the normal display there. And I'm going to scale that in just a little bit, because it is looking a little sharp. I'm actually going to bump that up too. Okay, let's see here. I think I'm going to add an additional edge loop to all of this. Oops. Ah, that's not what I meant to do. Alright, there we go. This will sort of sharpen the edges out a little bit, and they'll be a little less round, but we don't want them to be too sharp. So we'll just put one in the middle, sort of like that. That works pretty well. Yeah, that looks good. I think I'll add one there too, because that area is pretty sharp as well. Okay, I'll just add a couple more up here. I want to add one in the middle of every one of these. That will significantly sharpen these up. There we go. Now you can sort of see the spiraling a little bit better. And that looks good. So, before we add the cap, let's get a lighting setup. Just a basic lighting setup. I'm gonna sort of adjust the camera here. Oops, wrong way. Something sort of like that. Just get it positioned the way you want it to. I like to give it a little angle, like I did in the, in the preview that I showed you towards the beginning. So we'll just make it something sort of like that. And let's get our lighting set up. Let's add a spot lamp to begin with. This will be our key lamp. We'll move that up over here, maybe about something like that. Let's see. I like it coming more from a generalized direction. Something more like that. So let's give this a slight orange tint so we can do the warm and cool lighting technique. And we'll probably want to raise the energy of that. I don't know how much, but we'll just see. And let's just take a look and see how that looks. I'm going to turn down the dimensions of this since we're just sort of previewing it. Yeah, that looks pretty bad. It's not light enough. First off, I'm going to make the background white, like I did in the preview, because the gray background doesn't work as well in this case. And we definitely want to turn this up. Let's try like 25. Alright, that's too much. Let's try 15. That looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit less, like 12.5, because we will be adding other lights. There we go. Okay, and let's add a fill light next. We'll just duplicate that spot lamp and move it over here. Let's move it down, go into side view. Let's sort of fill in that area. Let's move it over a little bit, so it's something sort of like that. That'll work. Let's give this a slight blue tint. And let's set the energy to about 8. We'll try that and see how it looks. That's pretty strong. I'm going to lower that even more down to 5. That's pretty good. Alright, and we want to do one more thing that sort of brings out the edges of the model a little bit more, or sort of accentuates the highlights and whatnot. Speaking of highlights, I'm actually going to turn off specular on that, because we don't want the fill light casting specular highlights on the object, only the key light. Now it should look something more like that, which is better. And I'm going to add, let's add a hemi-lamp, and move it over here, and we want to angle it so that it's pointing through the object. Something sort of like that. And let's lower the energy to a 0.5, and let's render it and see how that looks. And that looks pretty good. Let me try increasing it and see how it looks. That works. Alright, and let's turn off specular on that too, so that it's not casting specular highlights. Okay, that looks good. Now we need to set up the material for our water bottle. So let's come over here. First of all, let me name this. Let's just name it bottle, so it's not a circle anymore. And let's add a new material and name that bottle as well. Let's set the specular intensity all the way up to 1, and the hardness to 200, because now you can see we've got a nice, sharp specular highlight. In some instances, you would want to change this to word ISO or word ISO. That gives a sharper one too, but that's typically used for things that are more like metal or... And in most cases, plastic typically wouldn't have that. So let's change that back to Cooktore. And actually, I think I'm going to lower that a little bit. We'll put that at 0.75. Alright. Let's give this a slight blue tint, just so we can make it look a little bit more water-like. And let's enable transparency. We don't want Z transparency, we want ray trace transparency. So, let's set the alpha at about 0.25. So now we can see that it got a lot more transparent, obviously. We'll set the fresnel at maybe 2.5. That'll probably work. And we could set the IOR at 1.46. You might want to look up, the IOR stands for index of refraction, which is basically how the light is refracted through the object, which can distort the image of what you see behind it, basically. And, as you can see, it warped up there. The index of refraction has multiple different materials. Plastic is one of them, of course. You could look up IOR plastic or plastic index of refraction or something like that, and you could probably find lists of materials and where they stand on the index of refraction. I found a nice one on CG Society that had a really long alphabetized list, so I might post a link to that in this video description as well. And alright, water bottles are also reflective, so let's give it a mirror value. Set the reflectivity to 0.5, and set the Fresnel to 2. And that looks pretty good. Let's see how that looks rendered. Alright, so you can see our water bottle material is rendering pretty nicely. I want to maybe accent those edges a little bit more. Let's see what I can do about that. Looks like the hemi lamp might be a little bit too strong, so let's change that to 0.5. See how that looks. Alright, that looks a little bit better. Actually going to lower the specularity down to 0.5. Let's render that. Okay, that looks good enough. We're not actually going to be adding water to this, as you may have already noticed. It pretty much looks like it already has water inside it, which is sort of what I was going for originally. If it was just an empty plastic water bottle, you would want to change the IOR value, because it would look a little different, even though plastic on the index of refraction, the way I read it, is 1.46. Water bottles are a much thinner plastic, and depending on what they have in them, if they don't have water in them, then I think it would refract, the light would refract differently. So, let's work on the cap now. I'm just going to come in here, let's come up here, and I'm going to select this loop, and I'm going to duplicate it and raise it up to right about there, and I'll scale it up a little bit. And I'm going to press P, and we'll choose selection, and that just separated it, basically. Excuse me. So now it's a separate object, and it's not the same as the water bottle. And let's extrude that upward a little bit. Something sort of, you know, before we do that, the cap has little ridges that we'll want to add. So let's start by subdividing it. Actually, instead of subdividing it, because that'll create some sharp edges, let's tab back out into object mode, and let's apply the subsurf modifier. Let's start with 1 and see how that looks. It's probably not good enough. Let's add 1 more. Oops. There. And let's apply that. Alright, those will be our ridges. Now, what we want to do here, we could just go around and select every other vertex, just like that. That would be pretty boring, though. It's easier to select everything. Come down here under Select, and I believe it was under... oh, right here it is. Every n number of verts, if you select that, it'll just select every other vertex automatically for you. So, that works really well. And we can scale those in slightly, sort of like that. That'll probably work. And we can then extrude it upward. Let's go into wireframe mode so we can see it a little bit better. I think that's probably a little bit too tall for a cap. Let me move that down. Something like that. And let's extrude it. Let's scale it in a little bit. Hit W and select smooth, and let's sort of smooth it out a little bit. It's not going to be perfect, but let's extrude it again. W smooth. I believe you can press Shift R to repeat the last action, which is a nice easy shortcut. And let's merge those. So now we have that. Let's add a subsurf modifier, of course. And we'll just add an edge loop at the top, just like that. And that's our cap. Well, let's set the shading to smooth, and we need to recalculate the normals again. And that works pretty well. Let's hit Shift Control Alt C, which is a complex key pattern. We'll want to select Origin to Geometry. So now the object origin is where it should be, in the center of the geometry, essentially. If you didn't want to press that shortcut, or use that shortcut combination, you could come over here to Origin and choose it from here. Yeah. So that's another option. You can come over here now, and let's add a material for the cap. Let's make this... let's not make it a single user, let's just delete it. Let's just add a new material, and we'll name it cap. For this, we'll want the specularity to be at about 0.15. It's not nearly... it doesn't have nearly as much specularity as the water bottle itself does. Now, the caps are transparent. It's really hard to get the transparency right on the caps. It's never going to look perfect, I don't think, in Blender Internal at least, the way the transparency is scattered. We can't really use subsurface scattering to work well either, because it's not transparent enough. So let's enable transparency. We'll keep it at Z transparency this time. And let's just set the Fresnel to 2. Something like that. And I'm going to save the .blend file before I go any further. Hope it doesn't crash. Uh-oh. Alright, there we go. And let's name it water bottles. That'll work. Okay. And let's render it and see how it looks. Alright, so that's not bad. I'm gonna make that a little bit brighter, because the caps aren't that dark. And I'm gonna put this back at 50% now, since we're not previewing anymore. Well, we still are, but we need a bigger preview to see the cap better. And that works. It's pretty good. I might want to come over here and lower the Fresnel value a little bit, to like 1.5, maybe 1.75. And possibly lower the specularity a little bit more. 0.1 maybe. Render that again. Let's just see how that looks. That looks a little bit better, I think. This could probably... I know typically, or objects never in the real world receive all of the light, like 100% of the light from an object, or a light source. But I'm going to turn that all the way up to 1 anyway, just so we can make it a little bit brighter, because I don't want to have to give it any emit value or anything. That looks a little bit better. I think that's just about as good as it's gonna get. Okay, so we have that finished. That's essentially what it's going to look like. Now we need to work on the label. Like I said, we'll be using paint.net for that. So let's just open that up now. Might take a little while to open. You probably should have opened it by default, but Blender runs a little bit slower when I'm recording and I have another program running. There we go. And let's just get rid of this, and let's add a new file. Let's make this 1600 was already there by default, by, let's say 250. Alright, that works. That looks pretty good. It's long and narrow. That's exactly what we were looking for. Okay. Let's get started. First, let's add the barcode, which is on the very left, closest to the left. Actually, there is something that's a little right down here. There's a little black rectangle at the bottom. I don't know exactly what it's there for, but we'll add it just to see how it looks. I'm not sure if you can draw filled rectangles in paint.net, but we can draw a hollow rectangle and then fill it in, so that's what we're going to do. Let me just make that a little bit thicker, and just draw it, looks something like that. And then we'll grab the paint bucket and fill it in. Again, I don't really know what that's for, but it is there, and so we'll add it just to add a little bit more realism to it. And let's add the barcode now. I'm going to use a barcode font that I found. I can't remember if it's for commercial use, so it might not be wise if you're actually advertising a product or anything like that. I can provide a link to the font for those who are interested, but I'm not trying to sell anything with it right now, so I think we're okay. And let me increase the text size to about 36, I would say, and let me find it in here. I have a lot of fonts. It's the barcode font. Typically the barcode would be sideways on a water bottle label, but I'm going to put it horizontally instead of vertically, because it's a whole lot easier that way. I still haven't really had much luck trying to rotate text in paint.net. So let's just start a text layer right there, and just type in a couple random numbers like 5903246, 467. I think there are about 10 numbers in the barcode, if I remember correctly. So let's add a couple more. 88. That looks good. That'll work. But let's make it a little bit bigger. Maybe 48. Alright, that looks a little bit better. Let's put that... let's just keep it right there. And... let's see. Typically, it has it so that if you turn in the bottle to a certain location, you can receive like 5 cents. So... let's do that up here. Let's change the font to... I don't know. Let's see here. Let's change it to Arial Rounded MT Bold. We're going to be using a lot of basic fonts for this. And let's make that a lot smaller, because that's really big. Something sort of like that. And... I don't know. I don't want to copy off of a water bottle label or anything. Let's just put some random letters there, even though I know they do stand for something, such as NY would be for New York or something like that. But we'll just put some random letters in here. Let's see here. And 5. We'll put a C, 5 cents. You won't really notice if there's a line drawn through it or not. I mean, you can't really tell. And let's make that a blue color, because water bottles do have a little bit of blue lettering on them. Something like that. And I will make it a little bit bigger too. Let's put that right about there. And now let's make this much bigger, something like that. We'll just add a couple more random letters, right about something like that. And put that underneath it, right about there. Okay. And let's see here. I believe they have a phone number and a website listed under here. So let's use the Arial font for this, because that's basic, just plain old Arial. And let's scale that down significantly. Let's use Arial Narrow, because that font was a little bit taller. I think it was like for consumer information. Then let's have a number listed there. Let me turn that down. Let's see here. Just call 1-800-892-444. Something like that. And that works pretty well. Alright, then we'll put a website underneath it. Just make up some quick website. Let's see here. Let's make that bold. And let's say blenderwaterbottles.com. I don't know, something like that. People aren't going to be able to read the website anyway unless you do a huge close-up on the water bottle label. So, let's add a little box down here. Some water bottles, at least I know, like Great Value brands or whatnot, have a little box that says pure, refreshing, guaranteed. Let's just add that. So I'm going to draw another rectangle, sort of like that. And let's fill it in using the paint bucket, something like that. And let's add some white text to it this time. Let's make that white. And let's use the Arial Rounded MT Bold font again. Let's say... say clean, refreshing, and free. Just since we are using Blender and we listed the website as blenderwaterbottles.com. We'll just throw that in there, because I can't really think of anything else to put on there anyway. That size looks about right. Oops. Uh-oh. Oh. Yeah, you have to be careful, because if you click somewhere else, it'll be pretty difficult to edit the text layer before, if you even can. I'm guessing there's probably a way to do it using the layers, but I don't know. So, okay, something sort of like that. That'll work. Center it. Okay, we'll put the logo next. Let's see here. Probably... Okay, let's see what fonts we have to choose from here. We'll just use something basic. We'll use Arial Black, and scale that up. Say, whoops, it's still white. I forgot. Yeah, we'll want to change that color, obviously. We'll make it something sort of like that. Alright. Say Blender. We'll do the diagonal thing like I did before. Maybe we'll add a little bit more interest to it. We'll make it Blender. Oops. Water. Let's make that a little bit smaller. Maybe 26. Put it right there. Then down here, say bottles. And we'll make that about the same size as that before. Now we'll make it a little bit smaller. Make it 28. No, let's type in a value there. Let's make that 32. Okay, that works. And I'm actually going to make this lighter. Something like that. Okay, so we just have a little bit of a variation in the shades there. Yeah, we'll make it something like that. Okay, that works. And... let's see here. We'll just put another little box down there that says purified drinking water. Make this another blue colored box, something like that. That's really turquoise. That'll work though. Like that. Then let's fill that in. Let's make that a little bit darker. Something more like that. Alright, that's a little bit better. And let's add some more white lettering to this. So let's set the color to white. And we'll lower the text size down to about 20, we'll say. Let's say that's way too big. We'll make it 10. There we go. Yeah, that works. Like that. Okay. And next would probably be the nutrition facts. Typically I would use a variation between the Arial black fonts and the Arial narrow fonts, but because they're used interchangeably so often, it would be pretty tedious to watch me go through all those different fonts. So I'm going to use only Arial black. Maybe. Unless I can think of a faster way to do it. But let's start by drawing the dark blue rectangle. And just sort of draw it something like that. That works. That looks pretty good. Okay. There we go. And let's fill it in with a paint. No, sorry. I almost filled it in. This is different because this will have the text inside it for the nutrition facts. So let's add another text layer here. And let's increase the size of that font. We'll type in nutrition facts. That's too big. And actually we'll want to make facts a separate text object so we can move it closer to nutrition. So that it's something more like that. And it's not exact. Typically the font is a little more condensed and narrow, but this is really as close as I can get with the fonts that I have currently. So let's put on a little more information down along here. Let's do everything we can first, actually, with the Arial black font. So let's make the font size about 10, maybe. Say mount/serving. Make that a little bit smaller, maybe about 8. That looks about right. And then there's some spaces, percentage, daily value, with a little asterisk after it, like that. And let's make this a little bit bigger to add in the other stuff. And we'll say total fat. Whoa, where'd my cursor go? Alright, there it is. And we'll put that sort of like that. And that will be 0. We'll add in the percent sign and the 0 grams and whatnot after we do all this. Next will be the sodium. Like that. Move that just as far over, sort of like that. And the total carbohydrate. Oops. It's actually about, well, yeah, let's see. Oops. Let's move that over so that it's sort of like, it needs to be up closer to the sodium. Something like that. And back that up a little bit. Move it in a bit more. Okay. And protein. There we go. Now, let me add in the lines first. What I do for that is I just use a rectangle. We'll lower that, oops. Lower that down to about 3, maybe. And we'll just add in, let's add in the big line up here first. Something sort of like that. And then we'll add in the smaller lines down here, which are more like that. And then we need a couple more. We need one under what will be the trans fat. There we go. And another one under sodium. There. And one more under total carbohydrate. Wait, there. Okay. Now let's go in and see what we can do with the text and the Arial narrow font. So we want to put the 0G for 0 grams right there. Then move all the way over here and add the percentage sign. Then right here would be the trans fat, 0 grams. It's kind of narrow. It's a little more narrow than I meant to make it. Sodium, 0 milligrams. Oops, 0 milligrams. Just like that. Hit space all the way over here. Another percentage sign. Total carbohydrate, we have to fit 0g in there, barely. And the percentage sign over here. And the protein is also 0 grams. Just like that. And over here we have the serving size. I believe it was 8 fluid ounces. And servings per container. Typically there are 2. Let's put container on a separate line. 2. And, oh, we need another Arial black one here. So let's change the font over to Arial black again. Need to put on calories. Then we can switch back to the Arial narrow font. 0. And whoops, oh, did it again. 0. Okay. And move that next to calories. And calories from fat, 0. Then we have the little asterisk or footnote. It says percent daily values are based on a, I believe it was 2,000 calorie diet. And that's it for the nutrition facts. So after that, all they really show is the ingredients, I believe the source of the water, and where it was bottled. And probably where it's distributed to. So let's come over here and let me make this a little bit bigger, maybe size 12. Let's make this Arial black. And we'll list the ingredients. Oh, that's too big. We'll lower that in size. There we go. Move it over about here. Yeah, something like that. Okay. And, I know they put some other things in them, like, I know there was calcium something, I can't remember exactly. So we're just going to put down purified water. Again, no one's going to be really looking... Oh, I did it again. Purified water. No one's really going to be looking too closely at the label. And we need to make the Arial black again. Oops. Not Arial, Arial black. Bottled by... Oh, what should it be bottled by? Say it was bottled by the Blender bottling community. I don't know. We'll just put on something random like that. Okay. I'm sure if you're following this, you might have some ideas of your own to put on these. Let's see. The source is next. Oops. We want Arial black. Again. I almost typed Arial black. We need the source. Put it right about there. And, oh, what'll the source be? The source will be Python and C+, we'll say. It's the source of the water. And, it's distributed by size the same. It's distributed by, I think here. Change the font first. It's distributed by Blender tutorial websites. Will it fit? Oh. Oh, it won't. Oh, man. We'll lower it a little bit. Again, probably no one will notice. We need to put in a copyright now. We'll just say copyright 2011. Oops. There we go. And that's all I'm gonna add right now. You can add a lot more detail if you want. But for the sake of this tutorial, I don't know how long I've been going now. I lost track of time, which is probably a bad thing. Save the image now. Save it as, I'm just gonna save it to the desktop for convenience sake. We'll name it water bottle label. Oops. .png. And we'll save that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's come back here to Blender now. And we're going to hit Control-Alt-U. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under Import and Export. And let me find it here. We're going to find, there. Export, or import, the images as planes. So now we can come up here, and under Import, choose the images as planes. And we can load the water bottle label image. And there it is. If we hit, let me save this. If we hit Alt-Z to go into textured view, you can see it's already UV mapped, and it looks great, and it's ready to go. Okay. That looks pretty good. You know, I just realized the normals on our water bottle are flipped incorrectly. So let's flip the normals. There. Let's see if that helped it. Okay, there we go. That looks better. Let me see if that affected the render at all. Okay, no, it didn't. Alright, that's good. And now we basically just want to add this to our water bottle. So let's move it around. Let's drag it up to about where it would be. Which is, yeah, right about there. Okay. Let's add some edge loops to this. Oops. Let's see, how many should I add? Let me think here. That'll work. It's 11 different edge loops. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add a circle with 10 vertices. I'm going to move it up to right about there. And basically I'm just going to match these to the vertices in the circle. It's not going to be perfect, but that's okay, because water bottle labels aren't perfectly circular anyway. And just go all the way around this way. Oops. You can probably do this using the shrink wrap modifier, but I tried that, I haven't had much luck with it. Maybe you could experiment with that a little bit and see what you come up with. And we're almost done here. Move that over. Okay. Now we obviously want to connect it, so let's select those two, Alt-M, merge them at the center, and do the same with those, so that now it's completely circular. And we'll delete that circle. Okay. That's pretty good. I mean, we have that all set up. Let's add a subsurf modifier to it now. Go. And let's, yeah, reset the object origin. We can just scale it in a little bit. Yeah, we'll obviously want to scale it out just a little bit more so that it's not intersecting with the water bottle. And that looks pretty good. Let's hit Alt S, or Alt Z, sorry. Let's see. Yep. So those merge together flawlessly. That looks good. And let's assign it a better material now. This one should be good. Again, I'm going to brighten that up a little bit. We want to lower the specularity down to about a 0.25. And let's render that out and see how it looks. And let me rotate this. I want the logo to be facing front. Okay, there you go. And that's pretty much it. After that, I just went from there and duplicated them a couple times and added a bit of depth of field to produce the final result that I showed you at the beginning. But this is basically it. So that's a water bottle. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and I also hope that you've learned something from it. And hope to see you next time in the next tutorial, whatever that may be. So thanks for watching.